American soldier and Vietnamese girl, a sad love story during the Vietnam War. Hội An, 1969. The river carried the smell of salt from the sea that morning, mixing with the fragrance of wet bamboo. Lan stood by the edge of the small market, her conical hat tilted low to shield her face from both the sunlight and the wandering eyes of soldiers. The war had changed the rhythm of the town. Laughter was softer, conversations shorter, and every stranger's step was met with suspicion. Lan was 21, with hands that knew the patience of sewing and eyes that carried more weight than her age should bear. Her father had died 2 years earlier, caught in crossfire on his way to trade rice. Since then, Lan worked alongside her mother, selling woven mats and cloth to whatever customers dared travel the war-torn roads. That morning, the market was quieter than usual. A few stalls had closed after news spread of a skirmish not far from town. And then, cutting through the stillness, came the uneven sound of boots, heavier, foreign. She turned. A small group of American soldiers walked past, their uniforms dusty from the road. One of them, taller than the rest, slowed his pace as he passed Lan's stall. His eyes, pale, like the river under midday sun, lingered on the fabric she was folding. He said something in English, but Lan didn't understand. She shook her head politely. He smiled, and though his lips moved again, she only caught one word, repeated slowly, "Beautiful." Lan lowered her gaze, unsure if he meant the cloth or something else. That night, as she and her mother prepared dinner, she mentioned the encounter only in passing. Her mother's reaction was immediate. "Don't talk to them," she warned, chopping vegetables with sharp precision. "Nothing good comes from foreign soldiers. They leave and they leave trouble behind." Lan nodded but said nothing more. Days later, she saw him again, this time alone. He was crouched by the riverbank, sketching something in a small notebook. Lan had been on her way to fetch water, but curiosity anchored her feet. He looked up and, recognizing her, closed the notebook. "You?" he said, pointing gently toward her, then mimed the action of folding cloth. Lan gave a short, shy laugh. She pointed to herself and said, "Lan." He tapped his chest. William Carter." The exchange was awkward, stitched together with gestures, hesitant smiles, and the occasional shared word. Yet, something passed between them. Not understanding exactly, but a small thread of human connection. Over the next weeks, their paths crossed often, sometimes by chance, sometimes by design. He would buy small pieces of cloth he didn't seem to need, paying more than necessary. She would linger a few extra minutes at the river when fetching water, just in case he was there. But the village noticed. Whispers followed her home. A neighbor, Mrs. Han, pulled her aside one afternoon. "People talk, Lan," she said, eyes darting toward the soldiers on patrol. "Be careful. You don't want to be the girl they remember for the wrong reasons." Lan felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from shame, but from the uncomfortable truth that Mrs. Han wasn't entirely wrong. One evening, Will appeared at the edge of the market just as Lan was packing up. He carried something in his hand, a small folded paper with a crude drawing of the river, the bridge, and 2 stick figures standing side by side. Lan looked at it, then at him. He tapped the paper, then the moon above, then pointed toward the bridge. The message was clear: "Meet me tonight." She hesitated. In her chest, her mother's warnings clashed with her own restless curiosity. That night, she went. The bridge was quiet except for the creak of wood under her bare feet. Will stood waiting, holding 2 cups of something that smelled faintly sweet. He offered one to her, and she took it, sipping cautiously. They sat in silence at first, listening to the river. Then, with slow patience, they began to speak. Broken Vietnamese from him, broken English from her, mixed with hand gestures and laughter when words failed. It was clumsy. It was dangerous. And it was the first time in years Lan felt something other than the dull weight of survival. But as she walked home that night, she noticed the shadow of a man leaning against a tree, one of the local militia. He didn't speak, but his gaze was hard and knowing. For the first time, fear wrapped itself around her small happiness. Promises across the river. The rainy season came early that year. The air was heavy with the smell of wet earth, and the river swelled until its muddy water licked at the bridge's lowest planks. Lon and Will met less often now, not because they wanted to, but because the war had shifted. His unit had been sent further out for longer patrols, and the town was under closer watch. One afternoon, Lon was sewing at the stall when Mrs. Hahn approached again. "You're playing with fire, child," she whispered. "Do you think the Americans will stay forever? Do you think he will? When he leaves, he'll forget your name before his ship reaches the sea." Lon forced a polite smile, but the words lodged in her heart. That night, she asked Will, in halting English, if he would leave. Will looked at her for a long time before answering, "Yes, someday, maybe soon." The answer cut deeper than she expected. She knew soldiers came and went, but hearing it in his voice made it real. One evening, they met by the river during a brief lull in the rain. He had something in his pocket, a silver dog tag on a thin chain. "For you," he said, placing it in her palm, "so you remember." She curled her fingers around it, feeling its cold weight. "And you remember me?" His lips curved into a sad smile. Always. That night they sat longer than usual, sharing the quiet. And yet, beneath the stillness, Lon felt a current pulling them apart. It wasn't just the war outside, it was the war inside her. Each time she returned home, she saw the lines on her mother's face deepen. Each time she passed neighbors, she heard the whispers. And each time she saw Will, she felt the tightening grip of time. A week later, Will didn't come. Lon waited at the bridge until the moon climbed high, the sound of frogs loud in the dark. Still, he didn't appear. The next day, she heard from a young boy in the market that there had been fighting far to the west. American soldiers had been moved suddenly. Lon spent the following days in quiet dread, scanning every face in uniform. Then, one rainy afternoon, a soldier she didn't know approached her stall. He handed her a folded envelope. Inside was a letter, damp at the edges. The handwriting was shaky, but hers to recognize. Will's. "Lon, orders came fast. Couldn't say goodbye. I'll write again when I can. Keep the river for me. Keep yourself safe." She read it 3 times, then folded it carefully. It smelled faintly of smoke. She waited for the next letter. It never came. The river at dusk. Years passed. The war ended, but the ache in Lon's heart did not. Her mother died one spring morning. The market aged, the bridge weathered, but Lon stayed. She never married. Perhaps it was loyalty, perhaps fear, or simply that no one else could reach the same corner of her soul. By 50, her story was little more than a whisper. She still kept Will's dog tag and his one letter in a wooden box. Once, a foreign man paused at her stall, eyes lingering as if remembering something, but he walked away, and Lon said nothing. That night, she dreamed of the river again. Decades later, a vendor handed her a faded envelope left by an American. The letter inside bore Will's hand, written 15 years earlier, long delayed. "I came back once, but they said you'd gone. I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise. If the river still runs, I will remember you." Lon read it until the sounds of the market disappeared. That evening, she went to the old bridge. In the dusk, she pictured him beside her, sketchbook on his knee, the river shining between them. She smiled, not for a happy ending, but because the memory was hers alone. The river kept its promise.